Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today's tutorial is for a cropped long sleeve v-neck top with a stitch combo we love with a bottom band that is oh so flattering. Speaking of, if you're looking for your next flatter worthy make, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of easy to follow, stylish modern crochet tutorials and patterns with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 355 grams of yarn. That's 665 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5 and 5.5 millimeter hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you prefer digital or paper planners. I love the idea of paper planners and journals, but I'm all digital. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and treble crochet. This tutorial is made for size small. You can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5 millimeter hook and start by making a chain that starts at our underbust, so roughly where our underwire would sit, down to our waist. So I need roughly 5 inches or 13 centimeters, so I'm going to start with a chain 20, and I actually already have my bottom band already completed, so I'm just going to be doing a small sample size with you. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 3. That chain 3 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain, and we're all going to start with a treble crochet, so start with a yarn over of 2. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the 4th chain from our hook, we're going to bring our hook down. Into that 4th chain, insert, pull through. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 until we have 1 loop left on our hook. So yarn over, pull through the first 2, yarn over, pull through the next 2, yarn over, pull through the last 2, and that is our first treble crochet. Let's do this once more. Yarn over twice, insert your hook into that following chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. From here, continue with 1 treble crochet into the rest of our chains. Everyone's row 1 is complete. Now to get started on the following row, it is going to be a back loop slip stitch row, so we're all going to chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So finding the last stitch from our previous row, we're all going to insert into that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us, then yarn over and gently pull through both loops on our hook. Again, into that next stitch's back loop, insert, yarn over, and gently pull through both, and we're going to continue on with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch to reach the end of the row. But we do want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the following row can be too tight to work into. Now I've made my way all the way down with my row 2. From here, it is going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows, all within the back loops. So just to get started, on our row 3, we're all going to chain 3, flip our work, and do our first back loop treble crochet, so yarn over twice. Into that last stitch from our previous row, inserting into that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us, with 1 treble crochet. From here, continue with 1 back loop treble into every stitch, then our following row is 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So like I said, we're going to continue to repeat those 2 previous rows, so that's just a back loop treble, back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases, until we have a portion that can reach 2 inches away from mid-chest. We're all going to end right after an even number row, so that is a back loop slip stitch row. Then I'll meet you guys back so we can get started on the increase portion. So as you guys can see, I already have my waistband all completed. For this first portion of my waistband, I have a total of 10 rows. This width is just about 4.5 inches or 11 centimeters unstretched, We do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the top of that last slip stitch row. Now we can do the increase portion of our waistband until we reach mid-chest. So I'm going to do the following row with my sample size with you. So since we all should have ended right after a back loop slip stitch row, we're all going to chain 3, flip our work, put 1 back loop treble crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one so we can do an increase together. We've made our way down with our back loop treble crochets, leaving that last stitch. Into that last stitch, we're all going to do an increase of 2 back loop trebles. So into that last stitch, simply insert with 2 back loop treble crochets. There's my first, into that same back loop with our second. Now the following row will not have any increases or decreases, so simply chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now our first increase row and our slip stitch row is complete. Now what we're going to do from here is continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have a portion that can reach over to mid-chest. Once we have that, I will meet you back right after a treble crochet row. We can do our middle row, then mirror everything that we did here on the other side. Now the amount of rows that I have until I reached my middle row was a total of 13 rows. Now this width is roughly 6 inches or 15 centimeters unstretched. Now everyone's following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row, so just the following row that we'd normally be doing. No increases, no decreases. So what we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, making sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the top of this middle row just so we know where the middle row is. Now we're going to mirror everything that we did here on the other side. So once our middle row is complete, we're going to chain 3, flip our work. Put 1 back loop treble crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 2 stitches. Then I'll meet you back with our sample size and we can do that decrease together. Now we've made our way down with our back loop treble crochets, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now we're going to close off the row with a decrease of 2 back loop trebles. So we're going to yarn over twice. Inserting our hook into that second to last back loop, pull through, also into that last back loop, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. Then from here we're going to yarn over and start by pulling through the first 3 loops on our hook, leaving us with 3 loops on our hook. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through 2 till we have 1 loop left. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now that that decrease is complete, our following row is going to be a slip stitch row, so chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now what we're going to do is continue to repeat those 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of rows as the increase portion that we had on this side of our middle row. Once we have the same amount of rows, I will meet you guys back so we can work on the rest of our bottom band together. Now, when I have the decrease portion of my bottom band completed, my width is roughly 11.5 inches or 29 centimeters unstretched. Then all we're going to do from here is back loop slip stitch and back loop half double crochet rows with no increases and no decreases for the same amount of rows that we had when we got started on our waistband. But we do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the top of that first back loop slip stitch row. Now once we have the entirety of our waistband completed, we can get started on the single crochet row so we can get started on the height. So once the total amount of width is complete, I have a total of roughly 11.5 inches or 29 centimeters. We all should have ended right after our treble crochet row. We're going to single crochet along the top, so we do not have to do a chain up 1 cut after that last row. Now to get started on the single crochet row, we're going to start with 3 single crochets into every side treble, 1 single crochet into every side slip. So we're all going to start with a chain 1 and finding our first side row, which is a side treble for everyone. We're going to find that top loop and insert with 3 single crochets. So there's 1, same top loop with a second, and same top loop with a third. Now everyone's following side row should be a side slip stitch row. So find that top loop and insert with just 1. And from here we're going to continue with 3 singles into every side treble, 1 single into every side slip, making our way all the way up until we reach our middle stitch marker stitch. We are going to be working past this first stitch marker, but once we're worked into that side slip stitch row, we want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the top of that stitch. I'll meet you guys back once we reach our middle row. So we are back, we've made our way down and we have reached our middle row. Now into the top of that middle row, we're all going to do an increase of 3 single crochets. So I'm going to take the stitch marker out for now, don't put it too far. And into that top loop, I'm going to insert with 1, same top loop with a second, same top loop with a third. And I do want to make sure I'm inserting my stitch marker into that middle stitch, so that second single crochet that we made, so we know where the middle stitch is. From here, continue with 3 singles into every side treble, 1 single into every side slip, making sure that we're inserting the stitch marker into the top of that stitch, making our way all the way down. Once we do a chain up a 1 and cut, then I'll meet you guys back so we can get started on the shoulder. So we are back. Our single crochet row is complete. Now from here, before we get started on our shoulder portion, we're all going to want to insert our stitch marker into the stitches that we have that's nearest to the side of the base of our neck. Now what we're going to want to do is place this up to ourselves, making sure that this middle row still stays at mid-chest. Then we're simply going to insert our stitch markers into any stitch from the outer edges, making sure it's the same amount of stitches on both sides, into any odd numbered stitch that is in multiples of 3 that aligns with the edge of our neck on both sides. So I went ahead and inserted my stitch marker into the 15th stitch from the outer edges on both sides. We need to make sure that they're the same stitches on both sides, and that's just about 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters from the outer edge. Now what we're going to do from here, inserting our 5.5mm hook into the chain 1 space that we started with our single crochet row. Pull through, then make an even number chain that reaches the top of our shoulder, making sure that this single crochet row is still staying at our underbust or where our underwire would be. Now I went ahead and already measured mine out. I need roughly 9 inches or 22 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 40. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a single crochet, and from here continue with 1 single crochet into every chain. So we've made our way down with our single crochet row. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So start by finding that next available stitch into the base. We're going to insert in through there with a slip stitch. So insert, pull through everything. Now that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. So in through there, slip stitch, and the following row is going to be a moss stitch row because this is going to be a 3-row repeat. Now whenever we're getting started on a moss stitch row that starts along the base, we're always going to start with a chain 1 and flip. Now that we have flipped our work right after we did our chain, we're going to skip that first stitch, making sure we're not working into any of those slip stitches into the base. We're going to skip that first stitch and single crochet into the next. Now that is going to give us our first 2 stitches for the row. That first stitch is that chain space, that second is that single crochet. Doing this again, we're going to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next. And that's it so far. From here, we're going to continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next to reach the end of the row. So we've made our way down and our row 2 is complete. Now the third row in our 3-row repeat is going to be a moss stitch row. So whenever we're getting started on a moss stitch row that starts along the outer edge, we're going to start with a chain 2. That first chain is going to count as our turning chain, second chain is going to count as a chain, then we're going to flip our work. Now that we've flipped our work, we're going to skip that first stitch and single crochet into the next. So we're going to skip 1 into the next, which should be our chain space, insert with a single crochet. Now this gives us our first 2 stitches for this row. We're going to continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next to reach the end of the row. We are back and we have just completed our first 3 rows. Now it is going to be a repeat of our 3 previous rows until we're worked into our following stitch marker stitch, but since it's an odd number for our row repeat, sometimes our single crochet rows can start along the outer edge like our previous one, or can start along the base like our following one. So I'm just going to get the following 3 rows done with you, and then we can do the rest on our own. So connecting it into the base, it's going to be done the same way. So just finding that next available stitch into the base, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. That doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just there to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, and since this is our first row in our 4-row repeat, we're going to flip our work. And from here, simply put 1 single crochet into every stitch. So finding the first stitch from our previous row, not working into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert with a single crochet into that next stitch, which is our chain space, another single crochet. Continue with 1 single crochet into every stitch to reach the end of the row. We are back. Our 4th row, which was our single crochet row, is complete. Now just to get the following 2 rows completed, we're all going to get started on our following moss stitch row, and like I said, since we're along the outer edge, our moss stitch row is going to start with a chain 2 and flip. What we're going to do from here is skip that first stitch into that next with a single crochet, and from here continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next, reach the end of the row. We are back and our first 5 rows are completed. Now we're going to connect it into the base the same way that we just did. So finding that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. None of those slip stitches count as a stitch. And what we're going to do from here, since we are getting started on a moss stitch row that starts along the base, we're going to chain 1 first and then flip. Then we're going to skip that first stitch into that next, which should be our chain space from our previous row, insert with a single crochet. That should give us our first 2 stitches for this row. Then just continue to repeat this, making our way all the way down. We are back and our first 6 rows are completed. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 6 previous rows until we're worked into our following stitch marker stitch. Once we have that, I will meet you guys back. So we are back and our shoulder portion is complete. Now from here, we're going to get started on our neckline. So everyone's following row should be a single crochet row, and we all should have ended right after our second moss stitch row that ended along the base. What we're going to do is simply slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work, and then put 1 single crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3 stitches. Then I'll meet you back. So we are back. We have made our way down, leaving the last 3 stitches with our single crochet row. Now we're going to do a decrease of 3 half double crochets. So starting with the yarn over, into that third to last, pull through, second to last, pull through, and last, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through all 5 of those loops. Now this is the first row for our neckline. We should have 2 less stitches than our previous row. So to get started on our following row, which is a moss stitch row, we're going to chain 2. Whenever we're getting started on a moss stitch row that starts along the outer edge, we're always going to chain 2. That first chain counts as our turning chain, second chain counts as a chain, and flip our work. Then what we're going to do is skip that first stitch, then a decrease of 3 half doubles into the following 3 stitches. So starting with the yarn over, skip that first stitch, into that next, we're going to insert, pull through, next stitch, pull through, and next stitch, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 5 loops. That should give us the first 2 stitches for our row. That first stitch is that chain space, that second is the top of that decrease. From here, continue on with our moss stitch per usual. So we're going to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next, then do our normal moss stitch to reach the end of the row. Then to get started on the following row, we're going to slip stitch it into the base the same way that we've been doing this entire time. Then make our way back up with our moss stitch, leaving the last 4 stitches so that we can decrease together again. So we've made our way down with our third decrease row, leaving the last 4 stitches. Now what we're going to do is close the row off with a decrease. So closing off our moss stitch row with a decrease, we're going to chain 1, skip that following stitch, then into the last 3 stitches a decrease. So yarn over, into that third to last, which should be our chain space, pull through, next stitch, pull through, and next stitch, which should be another chain space, pull through, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. Then from here, it's going to be a repeat of our 3 previous rows until we're worked into our following stitch marker stitch. Now, just as a really quick tip, it is a 3-row repeat, but since it is a 3-row repeat, sometimes our single crochet row will end with a decrease. Since we already know how to do the single crochet row that ends with a decrease, we're just going to get started on the following row together. So we're all going to chain 2 and flip. Now start this row off with a decrease of 3 half doubles, so insert, pull through, next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through everything, and continue with 1 single crochet into the rest of our stitches. Like I said, we're going to continue to do our 3-row repeat until we're worked into our following stitch marker stitch, and then I'll meet you back. So we are back. We are worked into our following stitch marker stitch. Now from here until we reach our middle stitch marker stitch, we're going to continue to repeat the same thing that we've been doing along the top, but for the single crochet rows, we are going to be doing a decrease along the base as well, just so we can get a really nice point that leads to that middle row. So the following row may be a little bit different for everyone, but all we're going to do is just continue to repeat our 3 previous rows that we've been doing this entire time until we have the following single crochet row to do. Now, if your following single crochet row starts along the base or along the outer edge, that's fine. I will teach you guys how to do both, but just once when you reach your single crochet row, I will meet you guys back. We are back. We are working towards our middle stitch, and what we're going to do from here is our single crochet row. Now the single crochet row that I first have to do starts along the base. For those of you that start your following single crochet row along the outer edge, you guys are going to get started the same way that we normally would. So chain 2 flip, start with a decrease of 3 back loop halves, Then put 1 single crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3 stitches. For those of us that need to start along the base, we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base and flip our work. So the same way that we've been doing this entire time. We are going to start this following row off with a decrease since we're along the bottom. We're going to yarn over into that first stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. Then for us, we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3 stitches, because then we're going to do another decrease. We've made our way down with our single crochets, leaving the last 3 stitches. Now we're going to do another decrease of 3 half doubles, so yarn over, into that third to last stitch, pull through, second to last, pull through, last, pull through, yarn over, pull through everything. Now what we're going to do from here is the following 2 moss stitch rows. The moss stitch rows are always going to be the same, so no additional increases or decreases along the base. Then, when I reach my following single crochet row, I will do that following row with you and let you do the rest on your own. So I've just completed my following 2 moss stitch rows. My following row is a single crochet row that starts along the outer edge. So we're going to start this row off with a decrease of 3 half doubles, so chain 2 and flip. Then starting this row off, yarn over, first stitch, pull through, second, pull through, next, pull through, yarn over, pull through everything. Then put 1 single crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3 stitches. We've made our way down with our single crochets, leaving the last 3 stitches. Now we're going to do a decrease of 3 half doubles. So yarn over, into that third to last, pull through, second to last, pull through, last, pull through, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook, and that's it. We're going to connect it into the base the same way that we've normally been doing. Then we're just going to continue to repeat our 6 previous rows until we're worked into the stitch right before our middle stitch marker stitch. Then I will meet you guys back. So we are back. We have made our way all the way down until we're worked into the stitch that's right before our middle stitch marker stitch. Now, into that middle stitch marker stitch, it is going to be a single crochet row for everyone, no matter what size we're making, with no increases, no decreases. So what we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work. Put 1 single crochet into every stitch and slip stitch it into the base the same way that we normally would. But for those of you that have ended along the base, you're going to work into that stitch marker stitch, flip our work, and 1 single crochet into every stitch. We have just completed our middle row. Now we're going to mirror everything that we did here on the other side. So the following row may be a little bit different for everyone, so I'm just going to show you guys how to do each row, then I'll let you guys implement it on your own. Now, if you guys look at my piece, my middle row, which everyone's middle row should be a single crochet row, but if you're looking at the row right before that, it is also a single crochet row for me. And since this is the portion that we were doing right before we reached our middle stitch marker stitch, we are going to need to do an increase on both ends. So since I'm along the base, I am going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base and flip my work. We do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the top of that middle row as well, just so we know where that's at. Then for me to do my following row on the other side of my middle row, I am going to start the row off with an increase of 3 half doubles, 1 single into every stitch, then close off the row with an increase of 3 half doubles. So yarn over into the last stitch from our previous row, making sure we're still not working into any of those slip stitches into the base. Start with an increase of 3 half doubles. Now that that increase is complete, put 1 single crochet into every stitch, leaving that last one. Now into that last stitch, an increase of 3 half doubles again. Now my single crochet row is complete. I will be showing you guys how to do the following moss stitch rows with increases along the outer edge as well. Then I'll let you do the rest on your own. So to get started on a moss stitch row that starts along the outer edge, we're going to start with a chain 2. That first chain will count as a turning chain, second chain will count as a chain. Then to get started on our moss stitch row, we are going to skip that first stitch into the following an increase of 3 half doubles. So yarn over, skipping that first stitch into the next with 1 half double, same stitch with a second, and same stitch with a third. And now that this increase is complete, we shall have a total of 4 stitches so far for this row. That first stitch is that chain space, then the 1, 2, 3 stitches that we just did for the increase, then continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next to reach the end of the row. My moss stitch row that started with an increase is complete. Then to do our following moss stitch row that ends with an increase, we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, same way that we've been doing. Chain 1, flip our work. Skip a stitch, single crochet into the next, and do our normal moss stitch, making our way down, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now we've made our way down. We still need to close off this moss stitch row with an increase. We should all have 2 stitches left. and we do want to make sure that we're not overlooking that last chain space. That is my last stitch. So we're going to chain 1, skip a stitch, and into that last stitch, which is our chain space, we're going to insert with an increase of 3 half doubles. We have just completed our moss stitch row that ends with an increase. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 3 previous rows, so just making sure that our single crochet row starts and ends, or starts and ends, depending on which single crochet row you're working into, with an increase of 3 half doubles with 1 single crochet into every stitch until we're worked into the stitch that is right before our following stitch marker stitch, and then I'll meet you guys back. So we are back. We have just made our way all the way down until we're worked into the stitch right before our stitch marker stitch. Now what we're going to do from here is basically the same rows that we were doing here, but we will not be doing increases into our single crochet row that's nearest to the base until we're worked into this following stitch marker. So we're basically mirroring everything that we did over here. So since we already know how to do this rows, I'm just going to talk you guys through it. The following row may be a little bit different for everyone depending on which row we ended on. But all we're going to do is just the 2 moss stitch rows, making sure that we're still increasing along the top, and the single crochet rows only increasing along the top and connecting it into the base the same way that we've been doing this entire time. And I will meet you back once we're worked into our following stitch marker stitch. We are back. I've just completed the increase side of my neckline. I am worked into my stitch marker stitch. Now from here, we're just going to do our moss stitch and single crochet rows with now no increases and no decreases until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. Now, just as a really quick tip, for this last row that we have here, we should have the same amount of stitches as chains that we made. From here, just continue with no increases and no decreases. Like I said, once we have the entirety of our front panel completed, do a chain up 1 and cut, and I'll meet you back. Alright, so we are back. We have just made our way all the way across with our front panel. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so I did do a chain up 1 and cut. Now we're going to get started on the back panel, but the back panel is going to be done pretty similarly to the front panel, just without all the increasing and decreasing, so I'm just going to talk you guys through it. So starting off with our same 5mm hook, we're going to start by making a chain for the same amount of chains that we made for the front panel. Then do our treble and slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases, making our way all the way across for the same amount of rows as the front panel. So we aren't going to have this point, it's just going to be a straight shot all the way across. Then, still using our 5mm hook, we're going to single crochet across the top, the same way that we did the front panel, but without that middle increase. So simply 3 single crochets into every side treble, 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row. Just as a really quick tip, the amount of single crochets that we should have for the back panel, we should have 2 less stitches than the front panel because we didn't do that increase in the middle. Then from here, switching out to our 5.5mm hook, make the same chain that we made for the front panel that led up to our shoulders. So for me, that was 40. Then just do our single and 2 moss stitch rows with no increases, no decreases, making our way all the way across. Well, we don't have any more stitches left to work into. I'll meet you back so we can seam it together, then get started on our sleeve. So we are back. We have just completed both our front and our back panel. Now we're ready to seam everything up together. So what we're going to do is place our front panel on top of our back panel, making sure that the ribbing for the bottom band is faced in on itself. Then we're going to insert our hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back panel with our 5.5mm hook. Then we're going to pull through and start with a chain up of 1 just to secure, and we're going to do a single crochet row. So finding our first side row within the front panel, which is the side single crochet row for me. Then finding the first side row within the back panel, which is this one right here, find that top loop, and simply insert with a single crochet. Again, into my next side row, find that top loop, insert, next top loop within the back panel, insert, and single crochet, and that's it. We're just going to continue doing this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into within the front panel. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, then I'll meet you back so we can seam up the sides. We are back. We have just completed seaming up our shoulders, and now we're ready to seam up our sides. Now when it comes to seaming up our sides, we are going to seam our bottom band and our side at the same time so that we don't have a bunch of tail ends to weave in later. So what we're going to do is start by making sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then we're going to insert our stitch marker into any stitch from the top, the width that we'd like for our armhole to be. Since we'd like for this to be a comfy yet more snug sleeve, I inserted my stitch marker into the 22nd stitch from the top. That's just about 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters from the top. Now what we're going to do is start with an outside loop slip stitch seam with our 5mm hook first. So first, making sure the work is flipped right side out because this outside loop slip stitch seam is going to look like another back loop slip stitch row. we're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. We're going to pull our working yarn through and start with a chain up of 1 to secure. And now we're going to do our outside loop slip stitch seam. So start by finding that first stitch into the front panel and insert only in through that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop. Then when we have these 3 loops, yarn over, pull through all 3. Again, next stitch into the front panel, insert only into that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop, yarn over, and pull through all 3. Continue on with our outside loop slip stitch seam, making our way up our bottom band. Once we don't have any more bottom band stitches left to work into, I'll meet you guys back so we can work our way up to our stitch marker. Alright, so we are back. We've made our way up our bottom band with our outside loop slip stitch seam. Now we're going to do a single crochet seam until we reach our stitch marker. So to do our single crochet seam, we're going to need to flip our work wrong side out because we want this seam and the shoulder seam to be along the inside when we wear it. Once when it's flipped wrong side out, we're going to single crochet in through both the front and the back panel at the same time. We are going to be switching out to our 5.5mm hook, working our way up our body. Then what we're going to do is inserting your hook into that next stitch into the front panel, next stitch into the back panel, then single crochet around everything. Again, next stitch into the front, next stitch into the back, and single crochet around everything again. We're going to continue on with this, making our way up until we reach our stitch marker. When we do a chain up 1 and cut, repeat on the other side, then I'll meet you back. So we are back. We have just made our way up with our underarm seam and we've repeated on the other side. Now from here we can get started on the sleeve. So making sure that we're inserting our 5.5mm hook into our piece, making sure it's flipped right side out. We're going to insert our hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam within the armhole. Then from here we're just going to repeat our 3-row repeat. So we're all going to start with our first moss stitch row. We're all going to start with a chain 2. That first chain counts as our turning chain, second chain counts as a chain. We're going to skip a stitch into the next, insert with a single, giving us our first 2 stitches for the row. Again, chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next, and just make your way all the way around with our moss stitch row. Our first sleeve row is complete. Our following sleeve row is going to be another moss stitch row. So right after we've slip stitched into that chain space, chain 2, flip our work, do another moss stitch row. Then I'll meet you back at the end of our row 2. Our second moss stitch row is complete. Now the third row in our 3-row repeat is a single crochet row. So right after we've slip stitched into that chain space, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, 1 single crochet into every stitch, then I'll meet you back. So we are back. Our first 3 sleeve rows are completed. All we're going to do for the sleeve is continue to repeat our 3 previous rows until we need it to cinch. Now the placement of the cinch is going to be completely up to you depending on how snug you'd like for your sleeve to be. So I'm just going to continue to repeat my 3 previous rows until I need to do a decrease row, which will be a single crochet row. So go ahead and do as many rows as you guys need, and I'll meet y'all back right after a second moss stitch row so that we can do a decrease together. Then you guys can implement that decrease into the rest of your sleeve wherever you guys want. We are back and we are ready to do our first decrease. Now I have a total of 14 rows so far. Our decrease rows are only going to be done into our single crochet rows. So into the following row, we're going to start with a decrease of 3, then just 1 single into the rest of our stitches. So just to do that together, we're all going to chain 1 and flip. So to get this decrease started, we're going to insert our hook into the first stitch from our previous row, pull through, next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through 4, then continue with 1 single crochet into the rest of our stitches. We just made our way around with our first decrease row. Now we have slip stitched into that chain space. Now from here we're going to get started on the following 2 rows, which is just 2 moss stitch rows, again with no increases and no decreases. From here, all we're going to do is continue to repeat our 3 previous rows, decreasing into any single crochet row that y'all see fit the same way that we just did together until we get the total length of our sleeve. Now I have 1 entire sleeve completed. I have a total of 72 rows. The last row in our sleeve does need to be a single crochet row so that we can work straight into the cuff from there. But just to let you guys know where I did my decreases, I did mine where my stitch markers are. So into my 15th, 18th, 21st, 24th, 51st, 57th, and 63rd row. Now, once we have the entirety of our sleeve completed, I will meet you guys back so we can get started on the cuff. So to get started on our cuff, Once our sleeve is complete, we're all going to just work straight into the cuff together from there. So still using our 5.5mm hook, we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the cuff to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 10. Then we're going to do a slip stitch row all the way down. So once we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch, so yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. Then from here, continue on with our same slip stitches to reach the end of the row. Now that we're at the end of our row 1, we're going to slip stitch it into the base. So slip stitching our cuff into the base is going to be done exactly the same way that we inserted the body into the bottom band. So just finding that next available stitch into the base, go ahead and insert with a slip stitch. That slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work and make your way down with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So go ahead and flip your work. Finding the last stitch from our previous row, not worked into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert into that back loop, yarn over, and pull through everything on our hook. From here, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch to reach the end of the row. Once we do a chain up of 1, flip our work and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, and I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. We're at the end of our row 3, and now we're going to connect it into the base the same way that we just did. So just finding that next available stitch, insert with a slip stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again. From here, continue to repeat our 2 previous rows, making our way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I'll meet you back so we can seam it all together. And now that we have made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows, we are all done. Now we're just going to do the same seam that we did for the bottom band. So just to talk you guys through it, we're going to make sure that our work is slipped right side out, right side up. Insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Do the same outside loop slip stitch seam as our bottom band. Do a chain up of 1 and cut, and when we have one side completed, repeat the same thing on the other side. So now that our sleeves are all seamed up, the last thing we're going to do is our collar. So first things first, making sure that our work is slipped right side out, right side up. We're going to insert our 5.5mm hook into any one of the siders that we have along our neckline. Then we're going to do a single crochet row. So this is going to be fairly simple, working into any of the side rows along the back panel and working into the 1 middle row that we have within the front panel. We're going to be putting just 1 single crochet. But into any of the side rows within the slant of the front panel, 2 single crochets. So let's get that started. I'm going to be working down my front panel first just to show you guys what those 2 single crochets look like. So finding our first side row, this is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 2 singles. So there's 1 into that same top loop with a second. And that's it. Continue on with 2 single crochets into every side slanted row within the front panel, 1 single crochet into our normal side rows, which is 1 within the front, and 1 single crochet into each side row within the back panel. Go ahead and make your way all the way around, and I'll meet you back. So we have made our way all the way around with our single crochet row, and now from here we're just going to do back loop slip stitch rows exactly the same way that we did the cuff. So right after we've slip stitched into that chain space, all we're going to do is make a chain the length that we'd like for the collar to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 4. Then just do our same exact back loop slip stitch rows, making our way all the way around. No increases, no decreases. Go ahead and make your way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I'll meet you back so we can all seam it up together. We are back and our collar is complete. We are going to do our seam, which is going to be the same seam as our cuff, so just making sure that our work is slipped right side out, right side up. Do the same outside loop slip stitch seam. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, we are all done. The last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it, y'all. Hope you enjoy the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye.